Okay, we are ready to get started, so if the board members, again, can make sure you please have your microphones on, we'll get started. Are we on? Okay, good evening. There being 7:47 PM on Monday, October 14th, 2024. I'd like to call to order the Village of Brookfield Committee of the Whole meeting. Bridget, can we have a roll call for the committee, please?
Trustee Ketchmark?
Here.
Trustee Cote?
Here.
Trustee Hendricks?
Here.
Trustee Niramatsu?
Here.
Trustee Gilhuli? Here. Trustee Kaluzny?
Here.
And President Garvey.
Here. Thank you, Bridget. All right, we have several items up tonight to discuss. So the first item, we have a presentations by Williams Architects regarding the community center feasibility study. This is a project that's been mentioned several times at meetings, and we've had updates, and thank you to everyone with participating in the survey. I'm going to turn it over to Assistant Village Manager Stevie Ferrari to kind of let us know what we're going to hear tonight and what the next steps will be, and then we'll have, I think we have several people making presentations related to this tonight. So, Stevie?
Thank you, President Garvey and Board of Trustees. For many of you who have been tracking this project, it seems like it has been ongoing for a very long time. Within the board memo, we do have some background context as to the project start and where we're at to date. We had some transition in staffing as well as some delays on the collection of data materials, benchmark analysis being part of that, collecting from other comparable communities, really wanting to make sure that we had dedicated staff to truly oversee this project with due diligence instead of pushing a project forward for the sake of timeline. So we thank the community for their patience. We thank the board for your patience. When we re-engaged our project in 2023, we really had some dedicated staff as well as working with Williams Architects and their subcontractors to ensure that we had the best data collected, the best information we could provide, as this is a very important undertaking for the village in our community center feasibility study. Today, we have Williams Architects. Andy Dogan is our principal at Williams, who is taking the lead on this, and his team, as well as our subcontractors, Laura Payne from U of I, who conducted our survey analysis and coordinated the distribution of our random sample surveys, and she will be speaking to that tonight, including some preliminary results we were seeing from that part of the study, and Pros Consulting, who did the data collection in trends analysis in our Parks and Recreation programming for the village and our comparable data to other communities. Joining us virtually will be Travis Strandbarger from Pros Consulting. So you will hear his voice come out of the speakers, but you will not see his face. And he has a number of slides with information that are important to the study. So with no further ado, I will turn it over to Andy. He will walk us through our agenda for this evening, to include process timeline, background and program information, site analysis, survey results, and advisement on next steps.
Thank you, Stevie. Welcome.
Welcome. Good evening, President Garvey, trustees, managers Weiberg and Ferrari. My name is Andy Dogan from Williams Architects. I'm one of the managing principals with the firm, and we're excited to come before you tonight with quite a bit of information about what we've learned with respect to feasibility for the community center. So as Assistant Manager Ferrari mentioned, if we could go to the next couple slides, just go through the next couple slides here. We'll talk about what we're doing here, our team, what has been going on over the last several months. You'll hear presentations both from our business planning and feasibility consultant, Pros Consulting, as well as from Laura Payne at the University of Illinois on statistically valid survey results. We also want to present some very preliminary information on site analysis, potential sites for a community center, and then talk about what's coming next before we answer any questions that you might have. So a lot of information. We know there's a lot. We want to get through it quickly, but we do want to take the time to answer any questions.
Please take
or
your time. I mean,
concerns.
this is something, I mean, so I appreciate your sensitivity to time, but I know the board, this is anxious, something the board, so you've done a lot of work and a lot of people. So take your time. We've got all night.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you for that. Next, please. So what are we doing here? We are undertaking a very comprehensive, deliberate, and intentional process to determine the community's interest in and the feasibility of a community center. So we were engaged by the village some time ago now, and in concert with Pros Consulting and U of I, and soon Hitchcock Design Group, we'll be analyzing design and potential concepts. But before we do any of that, there's a great deal of foundational work that needs to happen to understand the market, understand what could go into a potential community center, get good, solid feedback, both in the forms of stakeholder interviews and focus groups and the survey work that's been done. And we want to make sure that we're evaluating potential sites and what may work and what may not before we even put a single line to paper or these days to computer. So we want to go through all of that with you tonight and really make sure we've laid as solid a foundation as possible as we can. Next. So there's all of us. Everybody is either here or online tonight. My partner, Tom Polis, who's co-leading the project with me, could not be here, but I've been leading the process ever since the very beginning. Next. So we've had a process diagram out for a while now. We provided the Parks and Rec Department with a few graphics to just indicate the process, the flow of where we are, and I'd say we're, to use a football term, at about the 40-yard line right now in the overall process. We have really built a foundation of information. We've talked to several of you, a number of stakeholders in the community. We've conducted both a statistically valid and an open survey with a number of questions, which you'll hear about. We've identified potential sites. We have more analysis forthcoming because we will obviously need to match a potential design and concept to those sites, and that design does not exist. It comes from this process. But we will share what we've learned so far. So like I said, we're about at the 40-yard line, and following this comes a community open house, as Trustee Naramatsu mentioned, to share more of this information with the community and get more feedback that can inform the concepts. And only from there do we start looking at design possibilities that match these program elements that we'll be discussing tonight and that village residents have mentioned as something that's desirable to them. As we work on those concepts, we will certainly work on cost estimates and make sure that what we put forward is not only a viable plan, but something that is within the village's financial reach in one manner or another. We eventually will arrive at a preferred concept and cost estimate through our presentations to you and our feedback to the community, and make a final presentation within a few months. So it's the overall process, but let's dive into everything we've learned so far. We'll start with a number of foundational pieces about the projects, the demographics, which many of you, of course, are aware of. But there's a lot of comparative analysis here and specific research into what specifically will be successful in a recreation and community center here in Brookfield. And for this, I'll turn it over to Travis Tranberger at Pros Consulting, who is online with us tonight.
Thank you, Andy. Good evening, Board of Trustees. I really appreciate you making the accommodations for me to join virtually this evening. I do look forward to being up there here in a few weeks for the first public open house. But this evening we wanted to speak on several of the data points that have come more clearly into the picture, as Mr. Dogan has mentioned, that will help inform the concept planning for potential recreation center in the future. And so one area of our responsibility to help support Williams Architects and the overall project team was looking at, the village of Brookfield service area, the demographics and recreation trends, whether those are national trends, regional trends, or locally, what is the community participating in? And so we really asked, these 4 questions that you see on the screen this evening to help give us a interest for recreation programming in a future facility. Next slide, please. So just some high-level statistics that came from our findings with the demographic analysis. We went off 2024 data and used the U.S. Census as well as Esri, a database, to determine these statistics. And so you can see the numbers on the screen before you. Median age about 40.6 years old. Typically, it's what we see across the country. The largest age segment is 35 to 54. One area, and this will be on the next slide, that we flagged as an area of interest to pay attention to is the continued growth of the age segment 65 and older. The median household income is higher than state and national averages, as well as the per capita income. And so what this suggests is there's potential opportunity for disposable income toward recreation programming, whether that be offered by Brookfield Parks and Recreation or other private or nonprofit entities within the community. Next slide, please. And so this slide kind of summarizes a few of the comments that I just made. One being that the older adult age segments, 55 to 75 plus, will make up a third of Brookfield by 2039. And that seems like, a long ways away. But as you're planning a facility, realistically, the facility, if approved tomorrow, wouldn't come online for probably 2 to 3 years. And so you're getting closer to that 2039 year. And this definitely is something to pay attention to as programs are planned for the future. This is a trend that we are seeing nationwide as well. Aging in place is contributing greatly toward aging communities, and Parks and Recreation agencies often will have to plan for this. As far as the growth rate of Brookfield, there is a significantly low annual growth rate from 2020 to 2024. This should be monitored closely over the next several years. And then a diversifying population. We see in the data that Brookfield has a diversifying population, and this should be reflected in recreation programs as well as public outreach. One other key data point, the white alone race will fall from 69% of the population in 24 to projected 50% in 2039. So that shows that Brookfield will continue to diversify into the future. Next slide, please. The other piece is, as I mentioned, the recreational trends analysis. And so we use a couple different data points for this study. One is Esri's Market Potential Index, the MPI. It measures the demand for a product or service, in this case, recreation or leisure services, within the defined service area of Village of Brookfield. I should mention that this is not limited to just Brookfield Parks and Recreation. This MPI statistic takes into account all different types of recreation providers, from the private sector, nonprofit sector, as well as public sector. And so the MPI just provides you a benchmark of the likelihood of residents participating in certain sports or leisure activities. And what we found is that Brookfield was above the national average for MPI for some fitness and sports activities. And I think we have these on the following screens. Yes, so the sports MPI shows top interest is basketball, volleyball, and softball. When you're talking about an indoor facility, obviously basketball and volleyball will be key parts of that, and even soccer to some extent could be an indoor sport. Next slide, please. The other major finding is that all of the main fitness type activities are well above the national benchmark average. And so what this suggests is there is a strong interest for fitness and wellness programming in the community. And again, some of that can be offset by the public sector or nonprofits, but certainly Brookfield Parks and Recreation will have a key role in addressing this community need in the future. Commercial recreation recreation in the future. And this data suggests that there is interest in that from residents. One of the other data points that we looked at was existing programs. And so we worked with Ms. Ferrari and her staff to take an inventory of what Brookfield currently offers. And you see those on the screen before you. And so there would certainly be an opportunity to expand on these programs if, especially with indoor facilities, if those are expanded on in the future. And so knowing what is currently being offered can also give us an opportunity to assess, again, where is Brookfield Parks and Recreation addressing gaps in the community with recreation and leisure services, and where maybe are there overlaps. So when there are overlaps in services, we either look for opportunities to potentially divest from those particular services because there may be somebody in the private sector that is set up better to succeed in those areas, or look for opportunities for maybe public-private partnerships or public-nonprofit partnerships for those types of programs. And those two exercises, looking at the competition and partnership opportunities, will be key as we look forward to planning a future indoor recreation facility. The benchmark analysis is, essentially what it says. We always caution clients to not, go all in with this type of data to inform something like an indoor recreation facility, but this can assist Brookfield Parks and Recreation staff in determining where they stand currently with similar size communities or similar size agencies that have recreation programming, particularly indoor recreation programming. And so we worked with staff to come up with comparable communities to collect data and compare that to the current state of Brookfield Parks and Recreation. And so on the screen before you, you'll see the population comparison. So in this particular benchmark analysis, Brookfield did have the highest population of the cities and park agencies compared. Next slide, please. As far as developed park acres, Brookfield fell just below the Park District of LaGrange and Riverside Parks and Recreation. I should note that Western Springs Recreation, it's kind of cut off in the graph there on the screen, but that park acreage is at 0 because this benchmark analysis just included Western Springs Recreation Department because we were focusing on recreation programming and particularly indoor facilities. And so the Park District of Western Springs is who maintains park acreage. So that's why you see no park acres with Western Springs. Also took a look at core program offerings, again, to get a good idea of what similar size agencies are offering in the region. And we typically define core recreation programs with the criteria that you see before you, among other points. But we worked with Village of Brookfield staff to determine what their core programs were. And then in our inventory form that was sent out to the other communities, we asked those agencies to identify those other programs. So the Village of Brookfield certainly does offer other programs in the area, such as adult athletics, early childhood is a big or a program area, but it was not necessarily classified within this criteria that you see before you for core recreation programs. Next slide. We also asked the question of what other agencies do with potential partnerships with school districts, and what we found across the board was that they're working with their school districts for recreation programming. And essentially what you see with this graphic is most of it has to do with youth enrichment, particularly before and after school programs, as well as out of school camps. took a look at what type of indoor facilities or indoor recreation spaces do these other communities and park agencies have. And so again, what we found mainly was that of the benchmark communities, most of them have a dedicated community center for recreation programming. Now, they vary in size, they vary in the type of programs and services that they offer, but out of the benchmark communities, only Brookfield and Willowbrook do not have a dedicated community center. However, they do utilize space within city facilities for indoor recreation. Also took a look at recreation program participation, and in 2023, the village fell below most benchmark agencies. They were above the village of Willowbrook, but the others had more participation, and that is likely because they do have year-round dedicated community centers or larger facilities that can house more participants. We took a look at the size of the operation, and so with this particular question, we were looking at full-time equivalent, the full-time equivalent measurement for dedicated parks and recreation employees. And of the benchmark communities, you'll see that the village of Brookfield fell below most of those, with the exception of the village of Willowbrook. And one correlation that we can make is that most of these communities do have a dedicated community center, and with that, usually, typically, comes more dedicated FTEs toward their operation. Took a look at the operational revenue, and so we took the average 2023. We also looked at their 2024 budget, but the average 2023 operational revenue, just over $1.4 million. And the village of Brookfield came in at just over $963,000, so significantly below the average. And again, we think this is because most of these communities do have year-round dedicated indoor recreation space, which brings more earned income opportunities. Likewise, we looked at operational expenses, and that came in, the average of the benchmark communities was just over $1.4 million. The village of Brookfield in 2023 was just under 1.2 million, so closer to the average line with operational expenses, but still below most of the benchmark communities. Another data point that we looked at, as I mentioned earlier, we took inventory of not only village of Brookfield Parks and Recreation programming, but other similar or alternative providers within the market. And so we look at defining the market within a 15-minute drive time. We know from our past work that individuals or households are not likely to venture much further out than an 8 to 12-minute drive for recreation programming or leisure services. And definitely once you start getting to the 15-minute drive time and beyond, that number decreases significantly as far as the market reach. And so we looked mostly within a 15-minute drive time within the region, and we used the core program areas that you see on the screen: early childhood, youth school, age programming, adults, special events, fitness, sports, and other types of programs, and looked at the different providers, whether that be nonprofit or private or other public agencies that provide those types of programs, so that it began to paint a picture of where the gaps are in the services. And as I mentioned earlier, there is an opportunity for Brookfield to meet resident needs with enrichment, art, cultural programming, additional sports programs, and community events. And as we mentioned at the onset, as the community continues to age, it's going to be important to provide wellness programming for active and older adults into the future. That is one area that we see with the overall alternative provider analysis, that there are not a lot of providers out there. You do have a YMCA within that 15-minute drive time radius and several other recreation type facilities. But there are a limited number of providers that provide that older adult wellness programming. And then lastly, we were tasked with performing focus group and one-on-one stakeholder interviews. And before you see a few of the themes that came from those interviews. And so indoor recreation space overwhelmingly is definitely a community expectation based on those interviews. But they want the space to be inclusive and have a wide community appeal. And there were several comments suggesting programming for young adults and, as I mentioned, older active adults and seniors. When asked how the facility should be funded operationally, the comments came back about taking a balanced approach to funding, and so looking for both earned income opportunities, partnerships, as I mentioned earlier, strategic public-private partnerships, as well as offsetting certain operational expenses with tax revenues. And I believe that is all of my information. So a lot of information, but I'll pause and take any questions, or I'm not sure, or hand it back to Andy. I'm not sure how we need to move forward.
Is the board have any questions at this point? Are you going to stay online for the rest of the presentation, or were you logging off?
I will. Yep.
Okay. Board have any questions at this point? Questions or comments? Okay. We can move along, and then, at the end, the board, feel free to jump in at any point if there's a presenter making things where you have questions, or we could just kind of take it all in at the end. So we'll move along then.
Okay. Well, thank you, Travis, for that foundational information. So one of the very next things Pros Consulting will be assisting our team with is to develop what we call core programs for a potential community center. So what specifically will be in it? What are we asking this community center to be able to do for the community? And we've already gathered a lot of that information, but one very important piece of information that you haven't heard about yet is what the community thinks and what the community is looking for. And we found in our experience to do a very thorough study, we need to engage the community as fully as possible. And that includes administering a statistically valid survey that is representative of the entirety of Brookfield's population to gauge their attitudes and opinions regarding a potential community center. This was conducted by the University of Illinois Extension, and I'm pleased to welcome Dr. Laura Payne here tonight to share some of her findings that will help us move forward into determining the program and the eventual concept design for the center. So,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Payne.
All right, thank you so much, Andy.
Welcome, Dr. Payne. Thank you.
Thanks. You, please call me Laura. We're not super formal in our department at the University of Illinois. I want to thank the president and the board and the staff and the audience for your interest in this project, this very important project. And we can go to the next slide. As Andy mentioned, the purpose of this study was to investigate the feasibility of potentially building a multi-generational community center within the village of Brookfield. There are quite a few aims, including examining how well needs are met currently with existing indoor recreation facilities, examining unmet needs and preferences for indoor facility amenities, also determining needs and preferences for existing and new programs and events. And an important part of this was to get input from the residents on willingness to pay for a potential multi-generational community center, and then kind of looking at existing use, because that can sometimes be an indicator of future use, looking at some marketing preferences, since you don't always, it's pretty rare that you have an opportunity to go out to your community and get community input from a survey like this. So a few additional questions were asked along with the community center feasibility questions. We can go on to the next slide. So a stratified random sample of 5,000 households was drawn from the population of 7,785 households. And just for your information, there were 300 households in the original list of households that were excluded from our mailing list because these are households that had submitted a change of address to the post office, and those were flagged and removed before the survey postcard went out. And there were 180 postcards with an undeliverable address. Excuse me. The final sample size was 4,500, or final population was 4,520 households. So a postcard with a unique QR code and link to the survey was sent to 5,000 households within the village of Brookfield, and these were this was a stratified random sample. We stratified based on race, ethnicity, and whether or not people rent or own, because sometimes people from those two different groups are less likely, well, research shows, to respond to a community survey like this. So you want to oversample those people in those groups. So for the random sample survey, a total of 406 surveys were returned for a 9% response rate, which is a pretty darn good response rate. It's on the higher end of what we usually see for a community survey of this sort. So this response rate ensured a 95% confidence level was met, which is the industry standard, which means that you can go plus or minus 5% error in the responses, which is really high. You can go to the next slide, please. So in terms of the demographics of this particular random sample, the respondents ranged in age from 23 to 88 years old. The mean age was a little bit older, of 50, than that of the community. This isn't really that unexpected, as people who are older often have a little more time to commit to completing household surveys. The standard deviation is 12, which means that people in this sample clustered around the mean between ages of 38 and 62. So that's how tight the sample is in terms of age. Primarily, the survey was filled out by females. 39% were male. That's actually pretty high. We often see 70% females filling out the survey on behalf of the household. Then there was a small proportion who preferred not to say or preferred to describe themselves. We can go on to the next slide. The final sample in terms of race and ethnicity was 79% white, which is a little over the village of Brookfield, 15% Latino/Hispanic, 3% Asian Pacific Islander, 2% Black, and little less than 0.5% of Native Indian, Alaskan, and Native Hawaiian. We can move on. In terms of household size and composition, the average household size was little over 3, which is a little bit smaller than the village household size of 3.2, and it ranged in size from 1 to 8. And when we take a look at who's in that sample and kind of what the household composition is, 51% of the respondents indicated their household includes married with a partner and with one or more child in the household. 8% are single with one or more child in the household. 28% married, partnered, with no children in the household currently. Doesn't necessarily mean they don't have children, it means they don't have children in the household. And 13% single with no children in the household. We can move on. And then we can look at, we asked about the ages of children who are in the household, and The majority of respondents have older children, so 38% indicated they have children from high school age on up. The next largest category are children who are between kindergarten and second grade, excuse me. That's the third largest group, and then third to fifth grade, middle school, and then the preschool and the under 2-year-old were the smallest groups when you look at the age of children in the household. Real quick, we asked about the use of facilities, parks, and programs, and one of the things we found is that there were a lot of respondents. You can see the kind of the darker blue bars. Those are folks who have not used any of those facilities thus far within the last 12 months. So the most frequently used facilities included the Village Hall for recreation, the Village Hall classroom, the basement recreation hall, and then Kiwanis Park and Ellard Park were pretty well utilized, along with programs. We can go on to the next one. We also asked, what keeps you from utilizing the Village of Brookfield Parks and Recreation more often? And a little more than a third of respondents said, well, I'm just not aware of their programs. That's actually not uncommon. We just finished a project with the Naperville Park District. They had about the same percentage of respondents who said they weren't aware. One cool thing is that this survey acts as kind of an intervention in and of itself, in that it informs and educates the residents about what is available. So that's good. About a third said they weren't interested in what is offered. 23% are not, so the facilities are not of interest to me or anyone in my household. 23% are too busy, 20% use another park and recreation agency, 17% have time conflicts, and fewer say, I use a private fitness club or facility. Then we asked about the condition, upkeep, and cleanliness of parks and facilities, and by and large, most facilities and the parks were rated as good, very good, or excellent. The facilities that were rated a little bit lower included the Village Hall basement, the Village classroom, and the recreation house. One of the things to note is that a pretty large number of respondents were unsure or couldn't judge because they have not used these facilities. So they just couldn't comment on it, weren't comfortable doing that. And then in terms of the evaluation of parks and recreation services, these are a set of attitudes, statements that people respond to, from strongly disagree to strongly agree, and 75% agree that Parks and Recreation enhances their sense of community, which is always good to hear. 78% agreed that Parks and Recreation is important to the quality of life in the Village of Brookfield. 32% disagreed that they're satisfied with recreation opportunities. That may have something to do with the limited number of facilities that you have. 52% disagreed that there are enough indoor recreation facilities in the Village of Brookfield, indicating a potential need and demand for those indoor recreation and community center facilities. 32% disagreed that the village has effective marketing, and 43% agreed that the village is responsive to community needs, and 45% agreed that staff are courteous and helpful. There were a number of people who were undecided, so that's important to note as well. All right, as far as household needs for programs and events, respondents were provided with a list of types of programs and the spaces that they take place in, and asked to indicate yes or no if they or a member of their household have a need for this. And the most popular, top-rated programs and the spaces included having a need for health and fitness spaces, walking and jogging track, general program spaces, and gym courts. And these are all facilities that are typically found within a multi-generational community center. And this does align also with what Travis was sharing about what they found in their analysis as well. Then after the yes/no question, we asked, okay, so if your answer is yes, how important are these facility amenities / programs? And the most important ones, again, and you're going to see this coming up over and over again, were health and fitness spaces, jogging and walking track, gym courts, dance and group exercise areas, indoor play areas, general program spaces, childcare, and theater and performance spaces. Digital technology spaces and space for adaptive recreation were seen as less important overall. In terms of in terms of the importance of the facilities, yeah. This is an Andy one. Yeah, I was like, wait a
Hand off the
minute.
baton.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Laura.
I just want to, Laura will be back in a second, but you may have noticed in that previous slide that you noted there was a 26 to 28,000 square foot range asked, and I thought I'd pause in Laura's presentation to mention where that came from. Whenever we do a survey or assess need, and especially willingness to pay, most people's natural question is, what am I paying for? What does that include? So for our purposes of this survey, and based on Williams Architects' experience with over 100 community centers throughout the country, we presented two different sort of menus or programs, ranging from one from 26 to 28,000 square feet and one with 30 to 34,000 square feet as a basis for these questions. It doesn't mean that these are our two only options, but we have to start somewhere in order to provide numbers to gauge willingness to pay. The smaller of those facilities that we've asked people about would include one full court gym with cross-court gyms, where the larger facility would include two full court gyms and additional program space. Again, want to emphasize that we don't know enough yet from this process to know exactly where this is going to land. This is why we're doing these surveys. This is why we're engaging the public to find out and determine the need. But it is important to put these options out there in order to be able to accurately get reasonable answers on ability to pay and interest for that. So with that, I'll turn it back over to
No,
Laura.
I have one question about that third
Yeah.
point. When you talk about a smaller facility compared, the 26 to 28 versus the 30, it says a smaller facility would include one full-size court gym, and the larger would have two and additional program space. Is there additional program space included in the smaller facility, or just?
Both facilities would have program
Okay,
space.
so it's
Yes.
the difference between one full-size court gym and two, and then both of them have additional program space?
Yes, the larger one would just simply have a bit more
Okay,
program space.
thank you.
Sure.
All right. We can go to the next slide. All right, so now that you have a basis for how these two different size facilities were landed upon, we asked residents to rate the importance on a 3-point scale, not at all important, somewhat important, and very important, the 7 or 8 different types of facility amenities that would be in each of the two sized community center facilities. So you can see what they are at the bottom across the bars, and rated most important, and most important is in the light green color, were, again, fitness center, track, support facilities, which include things like bathrooms and locker rooms, group exercise and dance room, and gym court with seating. Less important, kind of at the bottom, were our preschool rooms. And then for the larger one, support facilities, again, the fitness center, a track, group exercise, and dance rooms, 2-court gym with spectator seating, and this was one of the differentiating factors between the two sides. The larger one could have a roof terrace / green roof. Roof terrace could be an area that could be programmed, so that could be another programming opportunity. And so that was also something that was fairly high on the importance ratings from respondents. So then we also asked, how important to you is that the facility is built and operated using best practices of sustainability? And 58% indicated it's very important to utilize best practices in sustainability, and almost 1/3 indicated it was somewhat important. So very few people indicated it was not at all important. So sustainability is a strong value in this sample. The question that everyone wants to know the answer to, at least for this sample. So overall, we asked willingness to pay based on the two different scenarios. Okay, so 50% of folks, and that's the first column of respondents, are willing to pay, said they're willing to pay $270 per year more in taxes for a $20 million bond that would be paid out over 20 years. You can see here that 28% indicated they are not willing to pay, but you've got 21% who are undecided. There's an opportunity, if you move forward with this project, to move the undecideds into the yes category, and maybe persuade a few of the no's, but I would focus on those undecideds. You'll notice that the results are fairly similar for 48% saying they're willing to pay $265 per year in additional taxes for a $25 million bond over 30 years. So they're fairly similar. He's 48 to 50, 28 to 30, and then 21 to 21. So something to think about there. And then we asked for more information about needs for programming, and we asked yes and no again, and once again, you will not be surprised to find out that health and fitness came out as one of the top programs, along with having a walking and jogging track for physical activity, general program space, gym courts, and theater and performance space came up as well. There is less need for early childhood classrooms, childcare areas, adapted recreation, and digital technology spaces. And then we asked them to indicate how much of a need from 1 to 5 on these different areas, these different programs, and for different populations. And again, health and fitness came up, indoor sports and athletics was highly rated, environment and nature programs were also highly rated, additional special events, which could take place, in a community rec center, so wouldn't limit you to outdoor areas for special events, arts and crafts, drop-in physical activities, adult programs for the 40 to 59 age group, which is another large age group of the village residents, and drop-in arts, hobby, and youth activities. Again, there seems to be less of a need for childcare programs, early childhood programs, and esports and gaming. Then we wanted to make sure we really got it on the needs. So then we asked, how well are these particular program needs being met? And a low mean score indicates that the need is not being met at all. And so a 1 is not at all being met, and a 5 is needs are completely met. So if you look at these mean scores, they're really between 2 and 3 So they're pretty far away from 5, which is need is completely met, which to me indicates that there's a moderate to high need in many different program areas. But I want to call your attention to the fact, even though esports and gaming is listed first here, it's important to note that only 80 respondents, rated how important that is. So that's a smaller number. That's a niche area who expressed a high need. So I guess I don't want you to read too much into that and put that into context, okay? But there's also interest in performing arts. So if you look at performing arts, as well as indoor sports and athletics, drop-in physical activities, programs and activities for adults ages 19 to 39, arts and crafts, fitness and health, environment and nature, and for youth. Again, you see some common themes coming up over and over again, right, from these sets of questions. All right, we'll move on to we also asked, hey, what other recreation agencies do you utilize? Because in the constraints question, some respondents indicated they go elsewhere for recreation. And the top locations include the public library, the forest preserve, private and commercial fitness, public school-based sports and activities, and private and commercial sports and activities. The village also asked a question about determining how important it is to have the program brochure translated into another language. The majority of respondents indicated that it is not important to translate the brochure into another language. Only 14% indicated it is important to translate the brochure into a second language. Kind of wrapping it up here, we asked residents how they prefer to stay informed about recreation and event opportunities, and the top ranked methods were the mailed program guide, email, the online program guide seems popular, social media, and the website. So just to kind of summarize some key takeaways here. Sorry, I got a little too close to the microphone. A majority of respondents indicated a need for additional indoor recreation facilities. 1/3 reported that they're not satisfied with current recreation opportunities. The additional spaces that are very important to residents or respondents include health and fitness, walking, jogging track, gym courts, general program spaces, and group exercise and dance spaces. And facilities that are important to include in a potential community center include things where you can do these activities: fitness center, track, group exercise, and dance rooms, gym courts with seating, and the roof terrace / green roof for the larger center design. And again, preschool rooms seemed less important. And then I think there might be one more, maybe not. That might be it. Oh, yep, one more on willingness to pay. So willingness to pay through a property tax increase was kind of similar between the two funding options. Little over 50% are willing to pay $270 per year for that $20 million bond over 20 years, and 48% are willing to pay $265 per year for the $25 million bond over 30 years. And again, 21% at this time are undecided. So perhaps if you move forward with this project, utilizing an educational and informational public relations campaign could help, to inform undecided residents and, get them into the yes category instead of the undecided or no category. And then just to wrap up, I want to say that there was an open survey as well that was like anyone in the community was invited to fill out, because being more inclusive is better than being less inclusive, you want to get as much input as possible. We presented the random sample survey tonight because this is the statistically valid survey, most representative of the community, and we know there aren't any duplicates also in this sample, which is really important. Right now, we are working on analyzing the open sample survey data. I just cleaned the data and whatnot myself to get it ready for analysis, and we should have some preliminary analysis results ready for you probably by the end of next week.
And I saw that you teased it on the one slide about the open survey results coming, and I don't know if it's a fair question to ask or not, but what's the,
Oh, do you want to know how many?
well, how many and what the confidence rate in that, and what typically that shows different?
It's a convenience sample.
Okay.
So, again, you can't, there's no telling if 4 people from the same household
Sure.
filled it out. We did ask, they had the same qualifications. So we know it's only residents because they had to put their zip code in. And if they don't have a Brookfield zip code or the Brookfield zip code, then they were sent to the end of the survey and couldn't take the survey. You can also only take the survey one time from because it recognizes what the device that you're using.
Okay.
So your IP address is recorded. So that's helpful, but it doesn't take into account 3 people, 3 people from the same family.
Sure.
Right? So there were 960 responses to that survey. So it'll be interesting to see what those results yield. But
Yes.
it's important for people to have a voice, right? And have both of these methods. We just want to keep the data separate.
I absolutely, and I we put signs up throughout the community, and that drew some attention from, I
Yeah.
mean, the original, the random sampling, the postcards came, and, there was, actually, there was a little bit of confusion when people saw U of I. I mean,
Yeah, I heard,
It-
that's why the second postcard, because we did 2 postcard
Right.
mailings, also included your logo as well.
right, yeah, no,
Yeah.
because some of us,
Well, your logo was on there too,
Right.
but,
No.
it's just something that could have been overlooked.
no, okay.
If they don't read the first sentence, they don't know that it's a collaboration.
Well, I'm an alumni, and I got a kid going to U of I, and I was afraid it was a bill, so I kind
Very-
of,
ILL.
I and I.
I went to Illinois State, if that counts for anyone.
All right, questions from the board at this point? I mean, there's a lot.
There's a lot to digest here.
There is a lot, and it's very helpful.
There'll be
It
a
kinda-
report, a final report as well.
Right, and I mean, even just this information, even in the form it's at, is just a lot for us to digest. But I do want to open it up to questions, comments, feedback from the board.
On one of the slides, it said adaptive recreation areas. Can you define what that is?
Well, that's adaptive recreation for anyone who needs any kind of accommodation
Okay.
in order to participate.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments at this time? I mean, again, it's a lot. It was a very comprehensive,
know.
and it was a very good presentation. I appreciate
Oh,
it.
thanks.
But I know the board would like some time to
You
just.
can always write us with your questions or collect some questions at a later time.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Sure.
Sure.
I turned this off just in case incidental noises, but I was just going back to the presentation, I forget his name, by Pros.
Travis.
Yeah, Travis. So some of the data, I was just interested because it seemed like there was going to be a negative growth rate, and the age groups were we were going to be have a higher age group moving up into 2039. So I was just wondering, I guess, what that means. What are the implications of that kind of data as in contrast to, I guess, the survey?
I wouldn't say it contrasts it because the interest in health and fitness and sports is all, targets that 20 to 39 and on up age group. There are more middle-aged and older adults playing sports than ever before, and all different kinds, not just pickleball. I know pickleball kind of, feels like they should get top billing, especially the players. and I like pickleball, but there are other sports out there. So I don't think it's in contrast to it. I think that it's aligned with it. You know, and the other thing is, one of the data points that Travis presented was that there's a pretty good number of other agencies in the area who offer childcare programs, and that makes also explain why childcare came out a little bit lower on the priority and
Yeah.
needs list here. And that you're already doing a pretty good job with that as well, because I think those are some of your signature programs.
That was one of the figures that kind of maybe surprised me. I mean, because I think there's a lot of family with young kids when we talk about daycare centers and things like this, but maybe there's a lot of private providers and other things. And the other, that I don't know what the exact classification was, technology and other programs. I mean, that may be a function of, we have a, beautiful new library, and there's a lot of technological programs and support there. And when you saw how many of the people, how people responded, they used those facilities. So,
Exactly.
that may be I would have thought that need would have been higher, but then I realized the library performs a lot of those functions, so.
Very good. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for all the work.
You betcha.
Any closing,
I should credit all the graduate students and undergraduates who worked on this, who are working on this.
thank you all, please, thank you, my thanks to all the.
We do have just a little bit
Sure,
more to
no,
go
I
through tonight.
just wanted to thank, but,
Yeah, you bet. So we've started to build the information both from a program standpoint and a community and resident feedback standpoint about interest in what a community center could possibly contain and what those core programs could be. So the next thing we need to understand before undertaking concept design beyond larger and additional community feedback is where could this possibly go? So working with village staff, 5 different potential sites were identified for us to evaluate, just as a test fit to see if a community center facility is even possible on the site and what the potential roadblocks or challenges might be. And to present this piece of it, I like to turn it over to our senior project manager and sustainability leader, Kim Nigro, to talk about potential sites. Kim.
welcome, Kim.
Thank you. I'm going to get the award for shortest time at the podium.
Take your time, take your time.
We'll go to the next slide. We're just going to quickly run through these. Again, these are just 5 sites that village staff identified as potential places. Just let's look at it. Let's see what would and we used as an example, this red footprint is a 30,000 square foot multi-level community center, just to put that footprint on these potential sites. So the first one is Madlin Park. This space is just west of S.E. Gross Middle School. It is half owned by the school district, and no discussions have been had at all about using this site, but again, just looking at how would that space even fit. So again, for reference, this is 30,000 square feet, and as you can see, that footprint would more than fill the site beyond required setbacks and with no extra space for
Is the
off-street
yellow
parking.
line, it's hard to see, is that like the required
That's
setbacks?
the setback.
Setbacks,
So
okay, that's what I
we're
thought.
beyond that, and we have no parking space left. So, next slide. So, and this is the Serbian Orthodox Church. Similar feedback, depending on where the entrance would go, would dictate some different setbacks, but we would mostly fill that site as well. A little bit of extra space for some off-street parking, but again, this is owned by the church and no discussions have been held to date. Next slide. So just north of there is St. Barbara Parish, and their parish hall site gives a little bit more space available for off-street parking. But again, this is currently owned by the Catholic Diocese and no discussions have been held. Next slide. Ellert Park, this site, there's quite a few more available spots within this larger parcel where the facility could go, but it is largely covered by floodplain considerations. It would be more difficult to consider that area, so we would probably look at the northwest corner of the site where we could skip those additional requirements and try to maximize usage of that area outside of the floodplain. And the final site is the current Village Hall site, where, again, we've kind of just focused in on this south end of the property, but just to show how that same footprint could be potentially placed over parking, still have parking as part of the first level of the facility. So you're not losing any of the current functions on this site used by other organizations, and could easily fit that kind of a space on this site. That's it. And with, you know, again, this was very first look at 5 properties. As Andy mentioned, the next phase, once we identify the core programs, will be, we have a matrix that will go through all the pros and cons of any sites that are making their way to the top of the list, and that'll be presented at the open house as well for feedback. Thanks.
Thank you.
So wrapping up the presentation for this evening, of course, our next step will be the community open house on the 23rd, where we'll present all of this information in a more condensed format. There will be a 15-minute presentation with a little bit of interactivity to it. We'll use an online tool that people can respond to from their cell phones called Mentimeter, where they'll be able to respond to a few questions and see results interactively. And then we'll have a series of boards set up and a number of our staff on hand to answer any individual questions that residents may have about the process or what we've learned so far. We will encourage folks throughout this process to leave us their comments and their thoughts. We provide comment cards. We'll also work with village staff to present, to develop an online means to gather feedback so that we can really understand as much of a cross-section of what the community is thinking about this to inform the next steps, which is finalizing that program, recommending a site, hopefully one site or possibly 2 sites for further consideration, and moving into concept development. So I want to thank you all for your time this evening. It's a lot of information, but the team has been really busy. I want to thank staff for all of their help in putting this together, Stevie, Luke, all of your teams, and would like to certainly answer any other questions you might have at this time.
Thank you. About the community, I mean, you say it's a more condensed program. Like, what are they going to see? I mean, it's summary. It's kind of a summary of tonight, but are they going to see detailed survey results? Are they going to see the possible locations, the funding questions? I mean, is that...
Yes, we will do our best to highlight that within a short presentation. As it turns out, the general public's interest in listening to folks like me for an hour is significantly lower than elected officials. So we want to summarize that, but also we will encourage staff to make this presentation available online. I'm sure we're being recorded right now, so this will be out there for further feedback, but we truly are interested in learning as much as we possibly can to inform what goes in this and where it should go and what it could potentially be.
Thank you. Do any board members have any questions or comments of any of the presenters that are here right now?
I have one more.
Sure.
I was just curious, as the Village Hall site, is that in consideration of the, this existing building would remain? Or is...
We're showing a scenario where that would remain. Now, one potential in this discussion that would need to be further explored is there a potential to also address other village municipal facility needs? That's somewhat outside of the scope of what we were engaged to do, but that is a practice area in a building typology, Village Hall and public safety, that we also are quite experienced in. That's certainly, that sort of option to combine services is certainly something that can be studied.
Okay, thank you.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I was thinking the same thing. If you're going to do that at that site, why not combine the 2 into one? and then you would have ample amount of parking. And then also on that, you were talking the first level parking, young lady was saying you could do first level parking here. The other sites that were looked at, would first level parking be an option at those sites either, like, or is it?
I think it could be. The goal at this site would be to, because you're bringing more, you're introducing a facility to an already busy site, is to make sure you don't lose parking to the extent
Right.
possible. We could certainly do that at other sites. It is more expensive than building on grade and building separate grade level parking. But it's been done successfully in other communities, and it's certainly worth considering at any of the viable sites here.
Okay, I would heavily lean, if we were gonna do anything on this site specifically, that we would combine the construction of Village Hall and a recreation center all into one, as opposed to having two different facilities.
Any other questions or comments from the board at this point? If I could just ask, because there's general public comment at the end of tonight's committee of the whole, but I just want to see if there's anyone here in the audience that might have any questions or comments related to this specific topic, because we have other committee items that we're going to talk about. We have an executive session, but is there anyone in the public that would like to, while the presenters are here, or are you here to make questions or comments on anybody here? Anybody on this topic? Okay, I just wanted a chance for you to, in case you were here for just that item. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We appreciate the opportunity and look forward to our open houses and the next steps in the process.
All right, thanks so much. Have a good night.
You
And
bet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on, the next item is a consideration of a request for a property improvement program application by Monroe LLC, doing business as Winnie's Playroom at 9039 Monroe Avenue. And Deanne's going to make a presentation to us from the results of the Community Development Department and the EDC. So Deanne, would you like to, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Before you tonight, we have a property improvement grant request for 9039 Monroe. Chris Watland is present tonight. He is with Monroe LLC. They acquired the property back in May of 2024. They applied for a special use permit for a children's play space, which was approved by Planning and Zoning in June. And they're seeking a grant to support facade improvements, including the replacement of doors and storefront windows for the entire building. The estimated project cost is $45,150. Before you, current conditions of the building, and then a proposed rendering of the, showing the improvements. The intended scope of work will include installation of 9 storefront windows, 7 commercial doors with transom windows, lime wash facade of, I'm sorry, they're gonna lime wash the facade bricks, and then they're using a special system for that, and the village reimbursement is $20,000, which is the PIP grant maximum. And any questions for myself or Chris? He's here to answer them for you.
Thank you for being here, Chris. I'll open up more questions or comments on the,
So the proposal for the windows, it's like you see here, for the entire building. How does that impact the other businesses there?
I spoke with the other tenants, and they,
if you could come up to the microphone, please, just so other people could, thank you for being here tonight.
thank you for hearing our proposal. I spoke with the other tenants. It's an architect and the Loft Teen Counseling Center, and they're both very supportive of making these changes. So we would just try to minimize any disruption by setting up any kind of dust barrier while we're doing the construction, and try and, again, minimize the disruption to them. But they're supportive of these changes.
They are, okay. Okay, great, thank you.
Other questions or comments from the board?
I think in particular, the expanding the size of those windows makes the building a lot more appealing and approachable. I think it's a good move.
I agree.
Okay.
I appreciate the coordination with the rest of the building, because when I first saw it, I thought it was only the
Right, that was one of the
portion.
concerns, and I
But
knew,
that'll really make the whole building look really nice.
And we did initially propose keeping the project smaller and starting with Winnie's and then doing a phased approach with the Economic Development Commission strongly recommended just doing it all to give a consistent look and feel from the day one. So we were on board with that, and also leveraging the Brookfield Bank loan for that, so.
Great. Fantastic.
I think it's gonna be great.
Yeah.
We
Can I just note, I also see a mural on
I
there.
was just thinking the same thing.
Is that something that is being considered? Just asking.
The mural is definitely being considered. In this specific iteration, it wasn't part of this implementation, but we would definitely want to do something there. Maybe in the spring.
Happy to talk to you about that.
Okay.
Same.
I always like to ask, how did you hear about the program? Like, what made you hear about it, or how'd you hear about it?
That's a good.
I don't want to put you, because this is a program that we're trying to tout, and, we've had a great deal of success with it, and we're actually reaching out to business owners and stuff. And you mentioned First National Bank, and thank you for doing it, because First National Bank has partnered with us and offered a financial incentive to do it too, so.
I may have just stumbled upon it through my own reviewing the village website, and
Great.
It was all
Yeah, no. All
other
right.
people are aware of it, and they've also mentioned it to me in hindsight. But I don't know who told me first, or if it was my own research.
Sure. No problem. So.
The commission, in reviewing the project, again, as it was presented, it wasn't the entire building. The commission wanted to see it expanded to the whole building. Phil Richard is one of our commissioners from Brookfield Bank, did bring up the opportunity that the bank has with it too. We probably could promote that a little bit more in conjunction with the program, because I don't know if as many people are aware of that part of it too.
I was probably less aware of that. And I think when the initial project was smaller, I was considering just funding it ourselves, but as it expanded, then that became a key determinant in us moving,
Sure.
or wanting to move forward with it, is the loan to be
Right.
able to do that.
Perfect.
Great,
Okay,
thank you.
so the process is we'll vote on this at the October 28th board meeting. You don't have to be present that night. You're welcome to be present, be on the board meeting, which starts at 6:30, and then staff will inform you of the results after the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deanne.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item is a consideration of an ordinance to approve and authorize a parking variance at 4431 Prairie Avenue.
Mark is our interim village planner that we're using on a part-time basis.
Mark, welcome.
Good evening. Thank you. Tonight, there's a petition from the property owner at 4431 Prairie. This is Triana Calderon. And the property is a multifamily structure. The reason for the petition is that the owner wants to construct a two-car garage at the rear of the structure. The two-car garage will take up some parking spaces. There are currently 6 spaces. There will be 5 after the construction of the garage. There are 3 units in the building itself. So the requirement for parking at this location is 2 spaces per unit, and the variation request is for 1.66, or approximately 1.7 spaces per unit. Next slide. So that's the location of the building right there. That's Prairie, and the angled road is
Plainfield,
sorry.
yep.
So they're 1 unit, or 1 building off of the corner of Plainfield and Prairie. Both buildings to the north and to the south have garages, similar to what the petitioner is requesting. So this is not, it's not out of character with the area. Obviously, the other properties have been approved. I'm not sure if they got legislative approval to do this or not, but there are garages on both sides. There does not appear to be a parking issue either on the street or on the property itself. Staff did go out, take a look at the property. There are some conditions attached to the approval if the board so deems it for consideration. So the parking spaces are in the rear of the property. The property shares the driveway on Prairie with the adjacent multifamily building. They both drive in off Prairie. These are different considerations that the board might take a look at to approve or disapprove. The petitioner's here tonight if you have any questions, or if they would like to make a presentation at all.
Okay, I'll see if the board has any questions or comments. If they don't, I mean, they're welcome to come up, I'll just see if the board has any questions or comments. Thank you for and you mentioned there were certain conditions that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended.
Yes, the parking lot, existing parking lot, there was items being stored in the parking lot that should be removed. The parking lot itself is in not good condition, should be repaved. There's definitely some holes that hold water when it does rain. And the paving itself is, it's mostly torn up. It's somewhat gravel, somewhat paving. So the suggestion is that this property be conformed to property maintenance standards and have an all-season pavement with the parking spaces painted on.
Thank you. Trustee Hendricks, is there anything you wanted to add?
I have nothing to add.
Okay. Questions or comments from the board?
Just a question, the garage is not considered parking spaces?
It is. So there'll be two parking spaces in the garage and then 3 outside the garage.
Okay.
Definitely want to keep the garage not to store other items, but to store vehicles.
Well, is that, and that's what I was going to inquire, is that a condition or is that an enforceable condition that the garage be used for tenant parking as opposed to storage, or what control or restrictions do we have over that where?
The village code indicates that the garages should be used for vehicle storage. If for some reason in the future, you can't really control that only to a certain extent. The property owner says that they're going to be using the garage just for vehicles.
Is there anything that would prohibit them from renting out that garage space to non-tenants?
That was part, I have no background information, it's not just my fear is that, the garage is, we're giving up or we're letting them remove existing parking spaces for the tenants, and then the garage is built, and if it's used for, off-season storage of someone else's vehicles or something else, and then there will be more parking on the street. Adam, is that something that could be a permissible condition and is that enforceable by us, that, the garage, if they build a garage with 2 spaces, that it's available to the tenants and it's 2 spaces available to tenants, that type of thing?
I see 2 issues here. We're talking about conditions that were put on a variation. We talk a lot about conditions that we put on special uses. That's one of our criteria for special uses. What special conditions can we put on there to lessen the impact on the surrounding areas? We don't have that condition for variations. However, we do talk about conditions on variations when it comes to the other factors. One of the factors is this isn't a hardship created by the property owner. So when granting it, although we're talking about conditions, we're really looking at that factor. What does the property owner need to eliminate so that they are not the ones creating this hardship? Second issue is the enforcement you're speaking of. I'm unaware of the provision in the village code that restricts the use of garages for vehicles only. If it exists, then that's your enforcement mechanism, but obviously, you won't be able to revoke a variation once it's created. So you have to find that enforcement mechanism.
I just have a question for the attorney. What if the village board wanted to grant this and they put in a condition that required the property owner must maintain the 2 parking spaces available to tenants? I think the enforcement becomes natural. Like if tenants move into the building and they don't have a parking spot, they would probably complain to us, and that would give us an enforcement mechanism to go back and look at the condition on this variation, and couldn't that become the enforcement?
But if he's not enforcing it, what's the remedy? I don't know if we're talking citations. I don't know if we have the ability to do that. revocation of a business license to use the rental property. I don't know. But we're not going to be able to force him to take down his garage for not using it for tenant parking.
And I mean, the condition that they would provide all-season paving, that's part of the current code, right? So that's something that we can require as a condition?
Property maintenance requires all-season pavement for parking spaces.
So, but the parking spaces within the garage are, I mean, the thing you showed, are you talking about the whole driveway, the entrance point, and the other parking spaces, or just the parking spaces for the garage? Because if they build a new garage, obviously there's going to be the proper surface in there, but are we requiring them, or is the plan to require them to, all the parking spaces have to be the all-season paving type thing?
That's the suggestion, yes. The driveway and the parking spaces.
Based on the availability of parking and the review of the board memo and the case, the Plan Commission was not concerned about the parking on this site, but it might be useful to hear from the petitioner on how they intend to use the garage and the site.
I'd be happy to let this is just based on past experience from decades ago where an apartment complex was given permission to build a garage and then rented the spaces out, and the tenants didn't have them, and so that's just based on prior experience. If the board would like to hear from the applicant what their intent is, I'm happy to do that. Would you like to, if one of you would like to come up, or both of you come up, we could just have your name for the record. And I think you've heard the conversation, and if you'd like to address that or make any other points to the board, we'd be happy to hear it.
Sure. Hello, good evening. My name is Triana Calderon. I'm the owner of 4431 Prairie Avenue in Brookfield. I just wanted a garage for my car. When we did purchase the property, it did have on the MLS listing that it was a 5 parking spot garage, not a 6. I don't know if that was due to MLS, realtors, so forth. Right now, I own the building. It is a 3-unit building. I purchased the building so that my mother-in-law can live on the first floor. She was in another unit, in another area where she didn't live with us. She's an older lady. She has heart issues. I wanted her to be on the first floor. So we bought a building that had 3 units. And so we live, we're gonna move into the duplex. We're just doing a little bit of remodeling and stuff for us to stay there. We don't really have the intention now, or even in our mind, to rent out this 3rd unit to somebody else. I have an 18-year-old son that may want his privacy, and he may be, in the same area. I recently sold a property in Berwyn that kind of helped me get the footing grounds for this, so it's not really a financial need for us. We just really wanted my mother-in-law to be with us in the same place so that we can watch over her and she can be, well taken care of instead of in another facility.
Thank you for clarifying that and your intention. Questions from the board?
As for the garage space, we wanted to build the garage there. We do, there's only the 3 of us with cars, so we don't have really a great need for all this parking or off-street parking. We just purchased the home in December, so it was, all the gravel and stuff was like that already. It's not something that we have compiled on. We do have intentions to resurface all that because we do see, a lot of need for that. Even just building or resurfacing, re-cementing, doing stuff like that, having that 5 parking spots there with the code of the drive aisle was still something that would have to be taken into consideration.
And thank you for clarifying, like I said, what your intent is. This project is something that I'm not intimately familiar with, but just based on past experience. The issue for the board is the variance goes with the property. I mean, we hope you're here for a long time and your mother-in-law's here for a long time, but if you sell the property to someone else, I mean, we want to make sure that it's because we're giving a variance, that those spaces are used for the tenants, so the tenants, because we're going down from theoretically 6 to 5 spaces, at least in theory, and then, so that was the only reason I raised the point, so. Any other questions or comments from the board?
No, I don't have any issue.
Okay, so our procedure is, we'll put this up on the village board agenda 2 weeks from now on the 28th of October, be on the 6:30 agenda, and the board, that gives the board a chance to review the minutes from the plan commission staff's recommendation, ask any other questions or think about it, and then we'll vote on the 28th. You're welcome to be here that night, you don't have to. If you're not here, staff will notify the results the 28th.
Okay,
All right.
thank you so much.
Thank you for
Thank
making
you for your
yourself
time.
available tonight.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you.
Okay, the last item is discussion of the 2025 Streets Improvement Project and Village Engineers Preliminary Estimate and Cost, Estimate of Project Cost. We have Dan O'Malley from Hancock Engineering making the presentation tonight. Dan, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. I'm here to do my best Derek impression, so but I'll try to keep it short and sweet.
That wouldn't be Derek then. Oh, I'm sorry, Derek, I didn't see you there.
As you all are probably well aware, it's about that time that we're starting to prepare for our street improvements project for next year. Since the referendum, we've typically tried to target about $3 million for work as part of these projects. That being said, we do have a large project planned for next year. That's the $3,700 grand in Brookfield Avenue improvements. That's about a $5 million project, $1 million of which is going to be funded by the village. So with that in mind, we have a slightly reduced program that we're recommending for next year. In order to select streets, we reviewed all of the streets that were rated a 3 as part of our 2021 pavement condition report. For our pavement condition report, we rated all of the streets within Brookfield a 1 through 5 for pavement condition and curb and gutter condition. The good news is we've improved any that were rated a 1 or a 2, hence why we were looking at the streets rated a 3. So we met with village staff recently and presented a couple options with respect to the pavement condition, the curb and gutter condition, and trying to stay within our budget. And with those criteria in mind, we are recommending 4 sections of street for improvement as part of the 2025 street improvements project. The first one is Monroe Avenue. It's the 9300, 9400, and 9500 blocks of Monroe from Kemen Avenue to Grand Boulevard. Next, we have the 3,400 blocks of Harrison Avenue and Cleveland Avenue. That's between Washington Avenue and Monroe Avenue. And then finally, we have the 9,100 block of Blanchard Avenue from Ogden Avenue to Rochester Avenue. So one thing I will mention is that for Blanchard Avenue, staff applied for and was awarded $200,000 as part of the Cook County CDBG Community Development Block Grant earlier this year. So that's going a long way to having this street included as part of our program. Additionally, we have $150,000 budgeted for miscellaneous patching, asphalt and concrete pavement patching throughout town. This is something that we've typically done on these projects. It goes a long way to doing maintenance on any streets that aren't part of this program and extending the lifetime so that the overall condition of these streets are in better shape. So as far as the scope of work for this program, it's very similar to past programs. We would televise the streets, make replacements to any damaged or deteriorated sections of combined sewer and drainage structures, replace any damaged sidewalk, curb and gutter, driveway aprons, while at the same time achieving ADA compliance for all these streets. We would have pavement patching at any areas of pavement that were failing, as well as from Monroe Avenue specifically, we'd be widening the pavement to 25 feet edge to edge so that there is more room, more space for cars to park on both sides, since it's got frontage on both sides of the street. And finally, we would mill and resurface and restore any areas that were disturbed as far as like the parkway goes. So for the estimate of cost for this project, we've got a total project cost of about $2.25 million. That would include the design engineering, the construction, and the construction engineering. This also includes the $200,000 deduction for the CDBG funding on Blanchard Avenue. So moving forward, our plan would be to come to the next board meeting on October 28th and come with an engineering agreement with the idea to start design shortly after that. Plan would be to finish the design in January or February and go out to bid as soon as we can after that. It's still our thought process that the sooner that we can go out to bid for these projects, the better prices we get, the more competitive the bids are, because construction season hasn't fully started yet. We kind of get out ahead of a lot of the other villages before they get their projects out. So we would go out to bid hopefully end of February, early March, with the idea of starting construction in April of 2025 and completing the project in July, August of 2025. So, thank you.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the board?
Dan, is this the end of the 3 rated streets?
No. So we have approximately, I want to say 17 miles of streets that are rated 3. And 3 is not a bad thing. It's fair. So right now we're kind of getting as we review them every year, we review all the streets that were rated a 3, kind of pick out the ones that are now starting to age out and starting to get to the point where you can't, with our yearly paving or patching budget, can't really, we're not getting the same investment out of them. But yeah, most of the streets, residential streets, are rated a 3. Streets rated a 4 or a 5, which we would rate like in very good condition, you wouldn't even touch them. Those are like the streets we've done within the past 10 years. So,
And I'm not sure if this is for you or for Doug. I mean, where do we stand with the bond money? Is this still part of the bond issuance? No, we're past that.
That's a very good question, and Doug was involved in these discussions, and as Dan said, we've been very aggressive with capital the last couple of years, especially this year. And there was concern, it's great that we've gone, and Hancock has been great in working with WCMC and getting the STP money and so forth, but we've been putting out a fair amount of local share to pay for those projects. Not bond money, but the grant money that we've been getting through WCMC. So we've funded a lot, or the majority of the aggressive capital this year with that funding. Doug was concerned, we have other expenses too that we're going to talk about next month at our budget workshop. And Doug was concerned if we kept up on that same pace, we just can't do it. You know, our general fund will be running on fumes. And so we did reduce the amount. And the direction to Derek and Dan was, we've got to, let's prioritize, as Dan said, the streets that really need to be done. The worst condition streets of the 3s, let's focus on those for the next year, and then we'll look at 26 when that comes.
And then the bond issuance, when do we start rolling the first one off? 26. Okay, thanks.
Other questions or comments from the board?
Yeah, that section of Cleveland, isn't that all concrete?
yes.
So does that mean you replace it with blacktop? Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, so what we would do is it would be just milled and overlaid with asphalt. We would
Okay, so you're not
replace-
ripping up all the concrete, you're just milling it?
Correct, yes, yeah. Patch any failing pavement sections, do any sewer point repairs, and then overlay it with asphalt. And then for Cleveland and for Harrison, those short blocks, it would be spot curb. For Monroe, just north there, also a concrete street, but it's got frontage on both sides, so that's where we'd widen, do the full curb. But again,
And we take into
But-
consideration any lead line replacements that we have to do in that section as
correct,
well?
yes,
during-
yeah, all,
Yeah, I was just gonna ask you.
lead services will have been replaced for all these streets by this point. We actually have already replaced, we put a general 5-year kind of targeted street program together last year, and all of these streets, as of these projects this year, the 2024 lead water service replacement projects will have replaced the lead lines on those streets
Okay,
to
thank
stay
you.
ahead and not rip up brand-new street pavements.
Thank you.
Thank you, and appreciate you bringing this forward. I mean, this schedule has worked very well for us. I mean, this was not always done this way. By bringing it forward now, we're on the aggressive schedule of getting out to bid in early spring and getting contractors who want to kind of book up their summer, so we feel like we do get better rates at that time. And then the projects start early, we don't worry about them finishing before the end of the season. I mean, with all the other work going on, there was so much work and still going on that we're trying to finish up, but these types of projects, by coming out now and asking for this, is the way to go, so. Anything else on the board? And Dan, I just wanted to thank you. You been everywhere this summer with all the projects. Dan's been the on-site guy for almost all the projects going on. Other people from Hancock have been involved, but you've been in a lot of dust and a lot of construction all summer with these lead service, the water main improvements, the street improvements, and I wanted to thank you for it publicly, so thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that ends the items, and Derek, you did a good job too. You always do a good job, Derek. All right, that ends the items we have up for discussion. Before we go into executive session, I'm going to open it up again to public comment. Is there any public comment on this side? Hearing none. Any public comment on this side? Okay, hearing no public comment, at 9:28 PM, I'd entertain a motion to go into executive session pursuant to Section 2C1 of the Open Meetings Act to just discuss the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific village employees, and pursuant to Section 2C5 of the Open Meetings Act to discuss purchase or lease of real property for the village's use.
So moved.
Second.
The motion to go into executive session was made by trustee Kaluzny, second by trustee Cote. Roll call, please.
Trustee Ketchmark?
Aye.
Trustee Cote?
Aye.
Trustee Hendricks? Aye. Trustee Nearmatsu?
Aye.
Trustee Gahuli?
Aye.
Trustee Kaluzny?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, we're adjourned into executive session at 9:28. We're going to do this in the room, so anyone not participating in